Well, you talking about Curtis Turner and Joe Wilson. They was two of the biggest nuts I ever run into in my life. And they wasn't nothing that they wouldn't do enduring each other. And I could tell stories about them two from now on. I mean, it was the things that nobody would do. You know, like out here in Charlotte, there's a guy pulled up behind Turner and he had his headlights on bright. And he loved Cadillacs. All the way the guy was over, put that car in reverse and knocked them out. You know, I got in trouble for it, got in trouble. It was at Richmond. He fell out of the race Sunday. It was on a hot Sunday afternoon. And him and his buddy goes to the motel there at the Holiday Inn to get the luggage out. And they got to look at each other. Neither one of them wanted to get out of his hot. He turns around, he backs it through the window, big plate glass window. Steps out, gets his luggage, puts it on. Then we down there in Daytona. On the old A1A, they was coming north, and there was a hotel dead in front of you, one part of the A1A, if you remember that far back. And then you had to make a dead left and a dead right. And the motel was dead in front of you. And they got to bet, and one of them say, well, I can make it at 90 miles an hour. Said, you can't. They sprawled in that car and let it went. They did. When they turned it around, they were running 90 and then backed it in the hotel. I mean, it was like that. I mean, I could keep telling things, I don't take it time, but people like that made the sport so interesting. And then on the racetrack, they were pure daredevils. And there was a lot of much more than there is today.
I'm going to touch on this tonight. First race I ever covered was the Asheville Weevil Speedway, which no longer exists. There's a high school that's on the site now. I went over there kicking and screaming. I'd never been to a race. My buddies in high school went all the time. And Asheville Weevil was dirt track then, half-mile dirt. And they would come home. I was away playing baseball somewhere in the summertime. We had a couple of summer leagues up in the mountains. And they would kind of come home from those races, Asheville Weevil, caked in red dust. And their mamas told me, said, it takes a bathwater 2 weeks to quit running red. But the first race I was ordered to go over there in September 1957. And there was a rickety frame tower on right at the start-finish line on the infield side. So I had a credential to go about anywhere and scared to death, and that looked like a safe place. So I went on top of that tower, and there were two guys up there, and I thought I recognized their faces, but I couldn't quite place them. And they had helmets curled around their arms, so I figured they were drivers. And like most drivers then, they were dressed in sport shirts and slacks. That's what they drove in. And I said, my God, that's Curtis Turner and Joe Weddell. And they were passing a fifth of Jim Beam back and forth and drinking it out of the bottle. Well, it turns out they didn't have rides that day, but they didn't know they weren't going to get a ride that day. And I'm sure the cars were going to be well lubricated, and I know Joe Weddell and Curtis Turner were going to be lubricated. But it turns out they didn't race that day, but I'm sure they would have. And by the time I left that tower, most of that Jim Beam was gone. And there were as a bartender in New York one time told me, Steve was with me, I decided to drink some Irish whiskey. And his name was Sean. Sean. He had that Irish accent. And I said, Sean, what do you chase this Irish whiskey with? He said, one of the sign. Well, Joe Weddell and